Nigel Nugawela.
Yeah.
I'm a researcher with the Center for Policy Alternatives in Sri Lanka.
What actually, we spend a week here, transformation thinkers. How would you consider yourself a transformation thinker? Why are you one?
That's an interesting question. Initially, when I started, when I arrived at the conference, when I met so many people, I really didn't have an awareness of being a transformation thinker. My work is, primarily, my work is surrounding the research of conflict and peace, governance and democracy. And I guess there was a certain transformation in that, because I realized, okay, we do think about transformation in our work. We do provide policy alternatives. And in that sense, it was sort of realization, okay, perhaps I am a transformation thinker, because I do have an understanding that there are certain policies required that would benefit the body politic of Sri Lanka. And it's that level of thought that is required in order to solve our problems.
Yeah. So you spent most of your time in Sri Lanka working there. How would you describe the current situation in Sri Lanka regarding democracy, politics, transformation? And I'm not talking about reforms. I'm really talking about transformation.
Well, in terms of democracy, we're experiencing several democratic deficits with regard to maybe the culture of democracy. We're probably an electoral democracy, but there are great areas that need concentration, greater facets. We have to look at constitutional democracy and look at how institutions are structured and how systems work, and that's what's important. With regard to political process, it's an absolute mess. And we have a crisis of opposition, we've had a crisis of constitutional reform, crisis of constitutionalism in Sri Lanka, and in that aspect, the failure of political parties, and especially opposition parties, to effectively counter the policies of the government that have been detrimental or have been ineffective, have really exacerbated the situation in Sri Lanka, because after all, in a democracy you need a strong opposition. So in that aspect we're not doing too good, but on a lighter note, there's a lot of economic recovery, a lot of investment post-war, and in that aspect there is a certain amount of transformation and economic transformation in the country. But on the political side, there's a sharp contrast, and we need to look at how we can level them out.
How can you level them out? Do you have any idea, any proposals, or?
It's very hard. It's very hard. I mean, at the end of the day, it boils down to reform. We have to address policies, and in Sri Lanka, we've had an ethnic conflict, and the central point has been the political solution, and how we address representation and access to power. And as long as we constantly avoid this issue of a political solution, we'll never be able to balance out the political process, and an effective political process with effective economic reform and economic growth. There'll always, the economic growth will always start rising, and we'll always be dealing with an authoritarian constraint. So it's about balancing these things out.
So we spent here a week with 20-25 other transformation thinkers coming from all over the world. Do you think events, conferences like this, I mean, it was really kind of intense this week, help you personally?
Definitely.
To get your stuff in your own country going?
Definitely.
In which ways?
I think the experience of this conference was sort of inspirational, for the lack of a better word. It was also sort of cathartic, because I was sort of depressed, sort of disparaged with the situation in my country. But I think there are so many stories of resilience here, of courage, and a positive leadership. And I'm relatively young, and I was surrounded by, in effect, elders and experienced people, and I could only learn from their experiences, and I could only take notes from how I should approach my work better and what is needed. There are still areas that don't match, because there are differing contexts, but still, I think this conference was sort of a personal transformation for me in order to deal with my context and approach it positively.
So what was the one thing you would say this was really the best or the worst you get out of these days? If you would have to pick out one thing, what was your aha?
From the conference?
Yeah.
One thing? I think it's the ability of different participants to draw a comparison, and to say, oh, we have this as well in our country, and how do we address this? Because I think it allows for a more substantive discussion on that particular issue. Because otherwise we're just coming in and we have different perspectives, different problems, and we're just talking about them. But there's no interrogation.
Okay.
Yeah.
How will this week influence now, and try to be precise as possible, how will it influence your work when you come back home? Which way?
I think I'll be more active, and I have this urge to do more. But obviously I'm horrible at time management, so I'm not sure how I'm going to approach that. But I have now a positive outlook. I was very pessimistic over the last 1.5 years, and I think when I return, and I hope when I return, I'll have a positive outlook. I'll be more proactive, and I'll try to do a lot more with my skills. Yeah. Yeah,
and would you have a wish for the transformation thinkers? What could be even better than it was? Is there anything?
The conference was quite good, and the level of talent and the intellectual diversity of the participants was tremendous. If it could be better, I guess, as we discussed throughout the conference, we would like the transformation thinkers concept to come to areas in South Asia or Africa or wherever, because I'm only one person representing my country, and there are so many transformation thinkers and leaders in my country that need to come out, and they need to be exposed to this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's important. It's about empowerment, and it's about identifying people who could have a positive impact in politics.